Hey everyone, it's been a while. I've been lost in the world of Elden Ring, and honestly, I wish I was having a little bit more fun with it from moment to moment. Don't get me wrong, it's a great game in a lot of ways, and it's gonna set the tone for a ton of future games. It's gonna win awards, I'm sure, but it's a really hard game to love everything about, all the time. Balance issues plagued the game right from the start, resulting in big patches. I'm sure this pissed off a lot of the speedrunning folk and the YouTubers who are out there cranking out tutorials. As an example, a weapon I'd found within the first few days had an extremely overpowered special ability. It just melted everything in front of me for a long while. And then it got patched. The multiplayer experience has been, at least for me, really hit and miss. And just staying connected to a host can feel like a battle of its own. Invaders already have ways of killing you without even touching you. Hackers are of course already doing what they can to ruin your day. In single player, invaders are seemingly rare, but if you decide to summon help for an objective and deal with the connection issues therein, it feels like an invasion is always triggered. In my experience, it felt easier to just rely on myself and the more predictable assistance of spirit ashes, which were a new concept. It's kind of like a pet or something, but even as a distraction, it's easier than trying to do everything on your own. I do love the Souls series, and absolutely adore some of the innovations and the additions introduced here. The horse mechanics alone created tons of entirely new gameplay possibilities in terms of fighting strategies, jumping puzzles, travel, and more. Adding the multiplayer menu was a great upgrade to the prior experience. Organizing things and saving you from using precious equipment slots like prior games. Summoning pools, depending on where they're located, were a great concept for the most part as well, when they work. Now, as far as George R.R. Martin goes, and his involvement here, I don't see it at all. If anything, the game felt like it had more of a Tolkien influence. It has a ring of power and all that. But there's really no ring either, because the damn thing shattered before I even got here. The story makes about as much sense as any Souls game, which is to say, not much at all. The cast of colorful characters you meet along the way, I can't even tell if they're alive or dead half the time or rotting. At this point, I'm not really sure what a tarnished is, except you live in a world where everything wants to kill you, except for like 5 people who maybe want you to be a lord. And then there's some nomadic shopkeepers, who actually seem to be the most normal people in the whole universe. Opening up a Souls-like world to this extent, and not really making it much easier to figure out, well, you might think of them as quests in any other game, but I don't feel like that's an appropriate word here for the steps you go through completing some of the strange hidden objectives. The game has a lot of mystery, and it has a lot of stuff that feels almost impossible to stumble onto without a wiki. Luckily, there's not too many NPC-driven objectives. Getting information and directions from characters here is a painful and cryptic experience. One thing I'd love to see From get away from is this system of having to exhaust dialogue. It's hard to say what really kept me playing. It's almost an addicting experience. It's a roller coaster of frustration and adrenaline. Not exactly something you might look forward to after a hard day of work, but somehow, there you are, chasing the dragon. Or, in this case, getting stomped by a dragon. Again, you try and try until somehow you eventually overcome. And those feelings are really some of the best feelings in the world of video games. The single-player experience is as smooth as you might expect, with hitboxes being pretty high in accuracy. Dodging attacks and blocking are similar to prior games, though there's some major changes to how the stats affect your character and make it a bit harder to determine what the most useful thing is to level up. I've always personally enjoyed dexterity builds, which in the past the number of points you dropped into dexterity would improve your chances of dodging an attack. With this new system, the stat affects a number of things from casting speed to fall damage, but it really has no impact on your ability to dodge any better. In conjunction with the quickly rising costs of each new level, and the limited areas where a player can really be profitable in terms of earning runes, I imagine a lot of players are going to have to find ways to grind up levels, to keep up with the ridiculous scaling of enemies from one area to the next. The nature of the areas here, and the more linear order to the required bosses, while the game will send you back and forth across the world, well, most enemies are made harder by just giving them more health. This basically forces you to upgrade your damage to keep up. And when you return to a previous area, you'll find yourself incredibly overpowered. In that same vein, I was disappointed to find out how New Game Plus works, compared to previous games. I wanted a little bit of a different experience, new enemies, a chance to find items that didn't really exist the first time around. But unfortunately, that's not how it works in Elden Ring. It's the same game, enemies just have a lot more health. They have a ton of variety to bosses and enemies compared to most games in general, so I'm not complaining about that, but recycling those same things like this just results in longer fights. With the game having a respec mechanic, a player can somewhat easily move from one playstyle to another. They can go from being a hardened warrior to a glass cannon and back again. It really eliminates the need for a New Game Plus run. Without spoilers, I'll say that certain things you do can affect the world as a whole. You might have progressed in a way that prevented you from completing some of those hidden objectives, and in that case, a New Game Plus world would give you that chance to do that thing, I guess. Now, with all that said, I don't want to give anyone the impression that this is a bad game. It has a ton of content, mystery, and gameplay options. I would think it's maybe one of the most accessible games for a new FromSoft Souls player too. It has so many elements that are incredibly well done, and some quality of life improvements to boot. But there are certain things that are just far clunkier than they could be. An easy example of this would be the combination of crafting and hunting systems, where you could choose to be an archer, hunt down animals, make yourself arrows, but the effort involved hardly seems worth it. What I'm most excited about is to see the impact Elden Ring might have on other companies, and other games in the future. I certainly got my money's worth, and whether they like it or not, other developers have to compete against the things FromSoft absolutely nailed here. The style, the attention to detail, the timing, the tight controls. What you see and what you hear, with the exception of some really odd dialogue at times, there's a lot here that makes you feel like you're playing a piece of art. And you are. That's it for me today, everyone. If you made it to the end, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and there's some Discord info if you like in the description. As always, thanks for watching.